I beg your pardon?
£10!
Don't be silly, Kevin. £5 we agreed, and £5 it is.
That is so unfair!
Take it or leave it.
All right!
In this video, I want to investigate the bridge from childhood to adulthood and why it seems so hard to cross. I want to investigate what is actually in between these two periods of a person's life, as it sometimes feels like being a teenager is like being part of a different species. I want to investigate and research why this middle period of our lives is so different and often so difficult to understand and get through. Maybe the fact that with adulthood comes moral and social codes, values are required and will be with us our whole lives that causes this transitional period to be difficult at times. What interests me is what others my age think about this subject, how they find life as a teenager, and how this has changed from the past, before the word teenager was even invented. How does it feel to be a teenager?
Well, it's really hard because some parts of you feel really childish and other parts of you feel like you want to be an adult, so you just don't really know who you are.
Being a teenager is really fun because you're almost in the prime of your life where you have all the freedom, but then there are bad things like sort of trying to get respect from your parents. It's when you have to earn it most, I think.
Difficult. I mean, it's one big learning curve, really. I mean, you've got to experiment with different things. You've got the responsibility of looking after yourself, and sort of your parents aren't always going to be around to look after you, but you're still not quite an adult. A lot of society and a lot of sort of older people see a stereotype where teenagers are rowdy, aggressive people. So you've just got to work against the stereotype, and you've got to try and, well, yeah, it's a learning curve, so it's just sort of building you, and it's the watershed between being a child and being an adult.
Teenage years are all about change and adjusting to this change. Being a teenager is undeniably a strange time for everyone. Your mind and body are changing, and this seems unfamiliar to many. Teenage years are often referred to as an experimental period, as Patrick mentioned before, as it is the part of our lives where we make many of our first mistakes in life, of which we then overcome and learn from. Many teenagers will lean towards drinking and drug-taking during this experimental period. The reason for this strange and sometimes difficult change, which links to our experimental period, may be because this is a part of a person's life where they can learn to express their newly found views and the learning of moral and social codes which come with adult life. It may be the start of values being established which will stay with a person their whole life. I strongly agree with the view that for many, becoming a teenager is finding out who you truly are. It is a time where a person explores and learns about the aspects of their open and hidden self of which they never knew existed. These aspects will then form the person that they grow up to be, all because of the teenage years, which was their opportunity to find out what their true identity is. However, others hold the view that there is no core self, and that we construct different identities. They believe that identities are just provisional. For example, I might decide to be a girly girl on a Monday, and then be a skater girl by the Thursday. People who have this view agree that as a teenager you only experiment but never actually become that person permanently, because as we grow older we have kids, settle down and all live the same normal lives.
Many militaires sin fait à Dieu. Je ne le mets pas. He is man. True. Qu'elle fait, man?
Mais non, Arnaud!
True, you become man. You take blood of mammoth. You get big.
Madame, fine, big fine.
So, fais ça down.
Go!
Text me. Now you say oui. Me nature
Maison.
and become man, voilà.
Avec un merveilleux.
Me now kill mammoth.
No one understand. Midnight Mammon. Echo.
Then why you make fishy?
And demon.
How did that?
It's alright. Go. I'm unkind.
Although the Armstrong and Miller Show sketch about how teenagers have existed since the beginning of man is a very light-hearted stereotype of the origin of the teenager, its point of view is put across very bluntly, the view that teenagers have always been existent. This concludes that being a teenager is a biological concept and always has been. This stereotype of teens having a bad attitude, being sensitive and confused, is reinforced here, which suggests that it is a natural process that everybody goes through. Evidence for this view is research that has been carried out by Cheryl Smith and her colleagues at the State University of New York, as they reckon that a temporary increase in the chemical receptor that inhibits brain activity in an area responsible for learning reduces a teenager's ability to learn a second language, find it harder to learn their way around a new location, and they're worse at detecting errors in a cognitive test.
They're gross. Girls from Jupiter, because they're more stupider. Actually, by myself.
This other illustration of the invention of the word teenager suggests that teenagers only started existing about halfway through the last century, which enforces the view that teenagers haven't always existed and are a product of the growing and changing culture that we live in. The invention of the teenager may have developed in the 1950s as a result of more spending power for young people after recovering from the Second World War, which therefore created a market for big brands that expanded on the idea of the teenager and teenage fashion. The uprising of rock music from the late 1950s throughout the 1960s made young people feel rebellious, as it was music that began to be written and performed by young people for the first time ever. Due to rock music, young people felt more powerful to think and feel what they wanted, even if that was different to the norm. These aspects of society are the reasons why many people believe that teenagers originated because of what was going on at the time, and that they are a product of social surroundings at the time. This idea that teenagers began as a social construct sometime during the 1950s is popular among many. In conclusion, I think the nature of teens has changed over time, and I wonder what the teenage experience will be like in 100 years' time. Some say it would be the same, that they will sleep more than adults, be emotion changeable, be fragile about their self-identities, all because of biology. Others argue that because society will be different, teens will therefore be different too. We will perhaps fragment into millions of tiny subcultures. Could the internet be the cause of that? Will teenagers ever get out of bed because of the internet? I wonder if teenagers will have it easier in the future, or if they will face more of a struggle than ever before.
People try to put us to down.